Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 1990s, obviously. This week we're going about mid-90s. We're going to go to September of 1995. This is episode number 55, so let's get started.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and more yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Got me a Baja Blast here. Not as good as Surge, but nothing will ever beat the greatest pop of all time. Yes, I call it pop from where I come from. But anyway, this podcast, if you've never watched it before, if this is your first episode, it's completely fine. I don't go in chronological order. I pick a random year and a random month, and then I go from there. That's how I do it. That's how I've done it since the beginning. We're on episode 55. Hope you guys got to check the bonus episode out that came out earlier this week. If you're watching it when this comes out, it's bonus episode number 14. It's all about video games. Cool little video I did. It's a long one. I said little. It's almost 3 hours. I talked for like an hour and 45 minutes. I didn't realize I was going to talk that long about video games, but I mean, video games is such a huge impression on me. Also included in that are a video interview that I did with my wife and a phone interview I did with my brother. And he had so much fun with it. We're making plans to do another one in the future. Maybe January or February's bonus episode will be about my brothers. Maybe can get all of them on different interviews to talk on there. If not, I can at least get Josh on there. Talk about some of the old days. He can verify some of these stories I've told you before and bring out others, I'm sure, embarrassing against me. Because I've definitely embarrassed them about some things. But that was the bonus episode. It's supposed to be for November. Had some health issues. Was in the hospital. I told that story the last podcast, episode 54. But that was supposed to be November's bonus episode. December's bonus episode is still coming out this month. It's actually going to be it's sort of Christmas based, but it's going to be after Christmas. It's going to be because we don't want to put nothing out on Christmas or even before because people are busy. But usually after Christmas, there's a little bit of a lull there. People ain't doing things. Maybe you got time to listen to it. It's going to be December 27th. It's a Saturday, and it's called Over the River and Through the Woods, and that's based on the old Christmas song about over the river and through the woods to grandma's house we go, or grandmother's house, however it goes. Anyway, it's an actual book that I wrote. It wasn't published or nothing, but I wrote it. It's all about that journey over the river and through the woods to my grandma's house, or Granny as we called her, my mom's mom, where we would go every Thanksgiving and Christmas and other times during the year, but it was something special about those times, and I wrote a book about it. I want to say over 10 years ago. So I'm actually going to read that and give my own, maybe some newer thoughts on it and stuff. And I don't know. It probably don't interest many of you because it's it's about my personal life, but a few family members might watch it. But if that's all, that's fine. I make these for everybody, but some of these episodes are for specific people. But if you don't know anything about me, maybe you listen to it, you can find out stuff about that, and maybe it'll give you some memories of your own grandma's house, or maybe that special place you guys always went for Christmas or other holidays, or just give you the good feelings. That's the whole point of this, is the nostalgia. I try not to dwell on any bad things that went on then. I try to talk about the good things, even though we're going to be talking about wrestling in 1995, which, as we all know, wasn't always the best, but there was definitely something that was starting in 95 that really got the ball rolling on probably wrestling's biggest period ever. Coming out of one of wrestling's worst periods ever. But anyway, like I said, we're going to go ahead and get started on the podcast here. Talk about wrestling. That event I was referring to happened on September 4th of 1995, and that was when the very first episode of WCW Monday Nitro appeared, whatever you want to call it. Premiered, I think was the word I was looking for. Anyway, it all works. yeah, that was a monumental episode. Of course, I think a lot of people that have been following wrestling for a while probably knows this story, but Ted Turner, who owned WCW, famously brought Eric Bischoff into his office and was like, what do we got to do to compete with the WWF? And Bischoff just kind of saying what he thought, but also at the same time never thought it would happen. He's like, we need to go in primetime. We need to compete with Monday Night Raw, which at the time, Monday Night Raw was big, but nowhere near as big as it would get. It was like, what were they, like 2 years into it? And half the shows were taped shows, the other half were live because they would just like tape 2 episodes. And then they'd sometimes be preempted by the dog show and they had to be on Thursday. But still, they were, getting a lot better ratings than they'd ever had. So, Bischoff was like, give me Monday nights on... And then, I don't know if it was his suggestion or Turner's, but, put them on TNT, which was their... TBS was always the WCW's network. But they put them on TNT, which was their sister network. It was more known for movies. And it just went from there. This first episode was famous. It was from the Mall of America. One of the first shots fired from WCW against WWF when they had Lex Luger appear during, I think it was during the main event. And because he was just been in WWF, and they thought he was signed to them, well, not signed to them, but that was back when Vince was still doing like handshake deals, wasn't really doing guaranteed contracts. That started with Hall and Nash going to WCW, like 96. But, that they thought Lex Luger was going to be there, and then he ends up showing up in WCW, getting signed there, and it was like, took him out right from under him, and it really kicked off that Monday Night War. It famously came from the Mall of America. It's a great show. If you go on Peacock Network, Peak streaming service, it's on there. All the WCW Nitros are on there. The Raws aren't, because when they moved to Netflix, they took all the Raws off Peacock, and they only have certain Raws on Netflix. They didn't even put the whole thing on there, which sucks. You can't even find every episode. I miss the WWE Network. That thing was great. Everything worked fine. No glitches. You could find everything on there. Anyway, that has nothing to do with back in 95. But yeah, that was the first shot fired in the Monday Night War was definitely Nitro and then Lex Luger coming over. Talk about some pay-per-views that happened that month. WCW, speaking of them, on September 17th had Fall Brawl 95, the War Games, which of course, War Games in real time here just happened in WWE. But of course, that was an event created by Dusty Rhodes. And they started having, this is the third Fall Brawl, I think this one's from Asheville, North Carolina. They started putting the War Games with the Fall Brawl. Some matches on there. Diamond Dallas Page with the Diamond Doll and Max Muscle defeated WCW World TV Champion the Renegade, which was basically made to be like a Ultimate Warrior ripoff. Another great idea from Hogan. But he beat the Renegade to win the title. Harlem Heat with Sister Sherry defeated WCW World Tag Team Champions Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater with Colonel Robert Parker. And of course, they beat them for the tag team titles. But of course, the main focus was always Sister Sherry, which is of course Sherry Martel, Sensational Sherry, whatever you want to call her, and Colonel Robert Parker, which of course is supposed to be like Colonel Parker from with Elvis. Although thanks to Flying Brian, they kept calling Colonel Sanders, and even had to have a chicken suit match once. That was hilarious, because everybody knows me and my KFC history. But yeah, it was always about them. They were like in love, but they were like different teams, and then sometimes they would hate each other. I swear those two were like the most entertaining things on there. But Harlem Heat won the titles, but they would actually lose them the next night to the American Nails on night. American Nails? What the heck is American Nail? American Males on Nitro. I got the M and the N transposed there. Arn Anderson defeated Ric Flair. This was a brief period of time when Arn Anderson and Ric Flair were actually feuding, and Arn Anderson was actually the heel. In fact, Flying Brian Pillman would actually attack Flair during this, and I would set off his involvement in the feud. And of course, they would end up getting back together soon to reform the Four Horsemen. But it was a short period of time there that they had them feuding. Of course, the main event was that War Games match. War Games is, if you didn't know, first of all, it has 2 rings, so there's 2 rings in the arena the whole night. For the single matches, they just supposed to use 1. But for the 2 rings, for the War Games, they have 2 rings and then a cage that covers them both. And 2 people start. And back in WCW, for the advantage of, who would end up having, because obviously if you got 2 people and then one come in after 5 minutes, and then I think it's 3 minutes after that, another one come in until all team members are in. Obviously you're going to have an advantage with one team where they have 2 team members over one. And they always had a coin toss. And somehow the heels always ended up winning that coin toss. But anyway, once all members are in the cage, whether it was 8 or 10, depending on the size of the team. I think for this team it was 8. Yeah, it was 4-on-4. Once everybody was in, then it was called the Match Beyond, where if anybody left the cage, their team automatically loses by forfeit. And originally in this, the only way to win was by submission. You had to give up. I think they introduced pins later on, which is fine with me. I wish I did eliminations on it, so that way you get more out of it. Then you could have like Survivor Series type matches, but that's for today's product. I'm talking about then. Anyway, in this match, the team of Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Sting, and Lex Luger, who replaced Big Van Vader because he left the company like the week before, they defeated the Dungeon of Doom, which is a team of Kamala, the Zodiac, which is of course Brutus the Barber Beefcake and his 9,000 other gimmick names, the Shark, and Ming with the Taskmaster. But since Hogan's team won, Hogan got 5 minutes alone in the cage with the Taskmaster. I did it again. Taskmaster. Speak today. I'm filming this at like 10 o'clock at night. That's probably why. But anyway, during that, the Giant came in and like injured Hogan's neck. And of course, this is a few months after the Giant debuted, and of course everybody knows him now as the Big Show, Paul White. But back then they were like saying he was Andre the Giant's son, which, I mean, he was as tall, and not as tall, but close to the same height, and they sort of looked the same, so people bought it. But of course later on you find out in WWF that Big Show's dad died, especially during the coffin sledding incident where Big Boss Man was dragging around Big Show's dad's coffin with Big Show jumping on it. That's a whole other thing. That's just like, I think that was 99, if not 2000. But yeah, that was WCW Fall Brawl. And then ECW hadn't started pay-per-views yet. That'd be another couple years. But they had their one of their super cards, which is a big event that they have from the ECW arena. It was called ECW Gangsta's Paradise, which is of course taking off of the song of the same name by Coolio, and the name, the Gangsters. They were the team of New Jack and Mustafa, so it was kind of named after them. Even though Mustafa didn't show up for the match here, I don't know why. It just said he didn't show up. Who knows with them? But several of these matches ended up airing on ECW Hardcore TV, which was their the local TV channel, or local TV show that would air in Philadelphia and also different parts of the country. Aired in my world on Channel 25, which I didn't know at the time. I didn't even know this ECW existed at this time, other than PWI magazine. It was covered in there, but you didn't see it on TV, so it was just like the Japanese stuff. It was like, I don't care, I don't get to watch it, so what do I care about these people? I would end up caring a lot about ECW. But anyway, this was actually the debut for 3 wrestlers. Steve Austin, who had gotten fired by FedEx famously by Eric Bischoff while he was injured. He showed up and did like a parody of Hogan, which was funny. And then the debut of Rey Mysterio Jr. and Psychosis, like the American debuts of them too. And they ended up facing off. Rey beat Psychosis. The Pitbulls defeated ECW Tag Team Champions Raven and Stevie Richards in some convoluted, it was 2 out of 3 falls count anywhere, double dog collar match. A lot of ECW stuff is convoluted and overthought sometimes, I think. Well, I mean, some of that made ECW special, but if you look back at it, they did it like too much, I think. If they would have toned that down a little bit, I'm not talking the violence or anything, but just the 90,000 people interfering and the 60,000 stipulations. But anyway, if the Pitbulls would have lost that match, they would have had to disband. But they won the match. They won the last 2 falls of it. Raven and Stevie Richards won the first. And in the main event, Mikey Whipwreck and the Public Enemy defeated New Jack, Too Cold Scorpio, and the Sandman with Woman in a Gangsta's Paradise cage match, which was like a cage match filled with weapons. This is basically like their counter to Fall Brawl, Fall Brawl in the War Games. But then the WWF had a weird pay-per-view. It was their In Your House 3, which was the In Your House pay-per-views were like they were pay-per-views, but they were only 2 hours instead of 3. And they were priced, lower price, so that way they weren't the big four, the Survivor Series, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Royal Rumble. And of course that became a big 5 with King of the Ring. But they were a lower tiered show, but still a pay-per-view. But this is a weird one. It was from Saginaw, Michigan. It was called the Triple Header. And it doesn't mean a triple main event. It's the main event featured the Tag Team Champions versus the Intercontinental and WWF Champion. And in that match, all titles were on the line. So if the individual champions beat the Tag Team Champions, they're champions. However, if any of the Tag Team Champions pinned, whoever they pinned on the other side, they would win that title. And this was just a cluster. I don't even know why they did this, because the whole theme through the night was Owen Hart wasn't there to defend the tag team titles. I should say it was Owen Hart and Yokozuna were tag team champions. They were facing the two dudes with tudes, as they were called, Shawn Michaels, Intercontinental Champion, and Diesel, WWF Champion. And the whole theme of the night, Owen Hart's not here, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And it turns out that Owen Hart was, he thought maybe travel issues or something, he couldn't be there. No, he actually was there, but anyway, before that, British Bulldog replaced him in the main event, to defend the tag team titles. But then Owen Hart got there during the match, gets in the match, gets pinned. So Michaels and Diesel win the tag team titles. But then the next night they had to give them back because Owen Hart, even though he was the actual tag team champion, wasn't the one that started the match, even though he got pinned. I don't know how the ref allowed him to get pinned. Or it was all stupid. I understand replacing somebody if somebody's not there, that makes sense. But to do this whole thing and then the person actually be there, then the person gets pinned, all for the next night just to give the titles back, and the very same night the Smoking Guns would go on to defeat Owen Hart and Yokozuna for the tag team titles. Those shows where WWF was at the time, low quality. This was their one of their lowest points in history. If WCW hadn't forced them to up their game, they easily could have seen them go out of business, I think. Yeah, but that right there is definition of a cluster beep. But anyway, that was wrestling. A couple of movies that came out this month. One was one of the most notorious horrible movies of all time, Showgirls. Everybody remembers that one. They probably only remember certain parts of that movie. But another movie that came out that's not one of the most fondly remembered movies is Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. This is the one where his niece, Jamie, of course, originally from the fourth and fifth, I think it was the fourth and fifth Michael Myers movies. She was a main character on there. It was supposed to turn, after the fourth movie, it was supposed to be the next Michael Myers, but then they changed that. Anyway, supposedly she's not actually in it, but stop, Snuggles. I think she was sorry, my dog going crazy. I think she was at the beginning, but it wasn't even the same actress. But she has a baby, and Michael Myers is trying to get it, and there's some cult involved. It got really, I guess, convoluted is our word of the day, just like that ECW stuff and the WWF was, and the Dungeon of Doom in WCW. Halloween 6 was just a convoluted story that a lot of people didn't end up liking. I mean, I like it for what it is. It's a lot better than Rob Zombie remakes, and a lot better than that crap we got with Halloween Ends, the latest Halloween movie with Michael Myers is on there for 2 minutes. At least Michael Myers was in this movie. But anyway, a convoluted movie, and then of course this will be right before they try to bring it back to its roots by changing the story with H2O. Halloween H2O, of course, brought back Jamie Lee Curtis in that one. And of course, the whole convoluted history. Michael Myers, first it's the babysitter, then she's his sister, now she's not his sister, now she's this, and she's got a son in this movie, and in this movie it's not his sister, and she's got a daughter and a granddaughter. Like, trying to figure out the timelines of the Halloween movies will give you a headache for sure. But video games, I know I just talked 3 hours on a video about video games, but really only one really noteworthy news thing happened for video games, and it was a pretty big one. PlayStation, what's now called PlayStation 1, but just then Sony PlayStation was released. And of course at first people didn't know exactly how it would go. It's a brand new system. We were used to Sega and Nintendo. And originally Sony was actually partnering with Nintendo to come out with this disc-based game system. It was going to be called from what I remember, the Nintendo PlayStation, I think. There was prototypes and stuff, but there was a thing with both companies over, who's going to own what parts of this, and it all kind of fell apart, and Sony ended up, I think it's safe to say once Sony came out, they pretty much were over Nintendo throughout, from the PlayStation to the in Nintendo 64, PlayStation 2, Game Boy. I was going to say Game Boy. PlayStation 2 and GameCube. And we got PlayStation 3 and the Wii and Wii U. And we got the PS4 and the PS5 with the Switch and the Switch 2. But I mean, Nintendo, I'm not saying Nintendo hasn't done good for themselves or anything, but I think everybody would the consensus would be, and not like taking personal opinions, but like sales-wise and popularity, Sony PlayStation has been, above Nintendo as far as, the popularity, the sales, all that stuff. But yeah, the PlayStation 1 came out, and I talked about it in the video, and my brother did, and my wife did, but like my brother was saying, most of the games we played were on demo because we didn't have many games. I told famously to us, we kept setting the PlayStation on top of the TV and then jerking the cord, and it fell off, and it lasted a little while, but especially a disc player, from the mid 90s, isn't going to take too many times of falling off a TV and hitting the floor. But anyway, most of what we played were demo discs. Like I remember playing the game Croc on there. And that was so much fun, but it was just like the first level, and just all kinds of stuff. It was a lot of fun. Didn't get much time with it. I think probably my most played system I've ever played out of the Sonys was a PlayStation 2. Probably PlayStation 3 follows that, PlayStation 4. But it all started there with the very first PlayStation. You could play CDs on it. These great games. Some of these games you're getting on there, you'd have full stereo sound, where if you get the same game on Nintendo, it's the MIDI sound. It's not full stereo because you can't fit all, you got to fit what you can on the cartridge, and there's a ton more room on discs. So, PlayStation made the right decision with going with discs, obviously, because, I mean, like I said, they were originally trying to help out Nintendo. Not help out like they were donating to them, but I mean, like, they were going to partner with Nintendo, and, just imagine if that would have actually came to fruition. I think Nintendo would have easily beaten out Sega. Sega probably still would have came out with the Dreamcast, I don't know, but I think they still would have beat them out. And as far as whether Xbox would have got made or not, who knows? Maybe Xbox would have, because Microsoft, which of course Xbox parent company, they actually partnered with Sega Dreamcast, for the modem for their for the Sega Dreamcast. So who knows? Maybe Microsoft would have thrown their money into Sega, and we would have had Microsoft Sega versus Nintendo PlayStation, and it would have been just those two, and they would have, like, who knows? They might still be battling today, but that's can be filed for what could have been. What ended up I can't talk. What we ended up getting was, as it shakes down now, we got Xbox and PlayStation. And of course the PlayStation and the Xbox are always battling. I think PlayStation's at the top. Xbox to me has always seemed a little clunky. It's just me. A lot of people are like, oh my god, you hate Xbox. No, I prefer PlayStation. But anyway, that was the PlayStation debuting this month, which is month and year, which was huge. A little bit of news on the technological front, because mid 90s, if you got your AOL disc, you can get your 1,200 free hours of internet. But eBay was actually founded this month. Of course, they weren't anywhere near what they would be, for the next couple of years. I should say popularity-wise. And eBay is not as popular today because the giants like Amazon and even now Walmart with the all the online capabilities. Not a lot of people use eBay as much as they used to, but I mean, eBay used to be the thing, man. If you haven't been on it, you can it's still a good service. You can face off with people in auctions. Sometimes get a better deal. I mean, sometimes people get in bidding wars and end up paying more than they would have. They have buy it now options, obviously, but it was always fun to do an auction on there, and you'd be like thinking like it'd be going. You'd be at the lead and nobody bidding on it. You're like, oh, I got this. And then like the last 2 minutes, you see someone bid over you. And I was like, oh crap, I gotta log in. But originally when I was doing bids on eBay, I would like the last like 15 minutes, I'd be like there staring at it, just waiting for somebody to bid, and then you're like, it's too much money. I can't bid anymore. But I've bought and sold a lot of things on eBay. I actually sold my WWE, the World Heavyweight Championship, based on the old WCW Big Gold Belt. Ended up selling that for $50 on eBay, and I had to sell it for that low to get gas money to come live back down here in Indiana. It was one of the things I had to do it. Otherwise, I bought the thing for $350, $400 almost new. Still got the nameplate for it though, because obviously nobody wanted my last name on the title. So I've kept this for years. It sits over here on my desk, my nameplate. I got a special engraved nameplate for it. Don't have the title anymore, but not that I've lost interest in wrestling at all. Obviously I haven't, but actually owning the title, maybe if I seen it at like a flea market or something and it wasn't super overpriced. But as far as like buying one new for the prices they have, no interest at all. But another set of news. Sorry, I gotta get a drink. Another news item. September 29th. The O.J. Simpson trial got sent to the jury, and I don't think they reached a verdict until the beginning of October, I think, unless I'm wrong on that. But of course, everybody knows how that one turned out. And if you know me, you know my feelings. O.J. for sure 100% was guilty, but thanks to the prosecution kind of being I don't want to say inept because I don't want to sound mean to them, but I mean the whole glove thing really sunk their ship, because for one, the gloves shrunk some, and of course OJ's gonna play it up. Oh, it don't fit, even if it did. I mean, that was just dumb having him try. What did they think he was gonna do? Put it on perfectly? I mean, he's an actor anyway. I mean, even if he wasn't guilty, that was a dumb move. But of course, the Dream Team lawyers and trying to make everything about race and everything else, they just, bought and paid for that trial. I could go on for days about that. I've watched so many documentaries, read countless books on it. I'm an expert on the O.J. Simpson trial. If they ever called me to testify for some reason, I don't know why. The man's dead, I know. And it's not, we know in America here, we have this thing called, oh, he's dead, everything he did bad went away. Not with me. But anyway, we'll move on now and talk about books. Just one book come out this month. I normally like to talk about a Stephen King book if it came out that month. None of his came out this month. And I like to talk about Goosebumps, which of course fell in love with Goosebumps, as many of us did in our generation from elementary school. Goosebumps came out the 35th book this month. It's called A Shocker on Shock Street. And it was actually the first episode of season 3 of the TV series, which was mega popular. 95, was it 95? Or I can't remember when. I think it might have been 95, maybe in October, that the first Goosebumps TV series started. I think I'm right on that. But anyway, it was, like I said, it ended up being the first episode of the 3rd series. But it's all about these different creatures on the street, and there's like this like theme park, and just it's one of those Goosebump books where if you like that type of story, you're gonna love it. If not, then Goosebumps probably ain't the thing for you anyway. But we'll talk a little bit about music now. Of course, everybody knows, if you watched any of these before, you know that I'm all about, especially 90s country music. Didn't listen to pop music at this time at all. But I will give the number ones for the Billboard Hot 100 charts, as they were called. Number one for 1 week, speaking of Mr. Oh, you're dead, so you did nothing wrong, Michael Jackson. That's all I'll say about that. His song was You Are Not Alone. It was number one for 1 week, which was rare in the pop charts, because the pop charts, there was like these huge multi-week number ones, it seemed. And for country music, it was like, if you got 2 weeks in a row for number one, that was rare. It kind of flipped here in this month, and I'll get to that in a minute. But another number one song was, like we just talked about, the ECW pay-per-view, Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio. It was number one for 3 weeks. And then the song that I don't think I've ever heard is called Fantasy by Mariah Carey. And it was obviously a big song because it was number one the last week in September. And then 7 weeks after that, so 8 weeks total. There we go with the pop songs being number one for like weeks and weeks and weeks. But of course, I was listening to American Country Countdown every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. with Bob Kingsley. It was on our local station in Cincinnati. We had 2 country stations, but the main one was always B105. And this always aired in Sunday mornings. Bob Kingsley, man, unmistakable voice of my childhood. One of those ones like wrestling announcers or certain TV personalities. It's just, you maybe I'll do not a podcast, but maybe a list of my like top 10 voices of my childhood of various, all things, like I said, wrestling, TV, music, whatever. Bob Kingsley will definitely be on that list. But anyway, number one for the first week of the month was Jeff Carson's song, Not On Your Love. Great love song. I love that song so much. Brian White, which was a newer artist at the time. Well, Jeff Carson was kind of too. But Brian White was one of those ones that people thought was going to be like a pop country star. But he ended up having a lot of good country songs. His song, Someone Else's Star, went to number one. And then a big song for Tim McGraw was I Like It, I Love It. I mean, that song was like all over the place. I don't think he recorded it live, but I think he had like live like crowd, not live, but like crowd noises put into the song to make it seem like it was live. That's the way it sounded. It didn't sound actually live. But yeah, that song by Tim McGraw was number one for 3 weeks, and then 2 weeks in October, making 5 weeks total, which is one of the biggest number ones of the time. And I mean, nowadays country music is just like every other music. Not to get too much into today's music or even today's time period for this podcast, but what annoys me is I'll see someone come out with an album of like 17, 18 songs. First of all, that's too much for an album. That should be a double album. But it's all digital, so it don't matter anyway. It's not, they don't care about CDs or anything. But with streaming now is how they base their stupid number ones these days. Every song that goes on there is eligible for this. So you could have like, I think I seen like Taylor Swift came out with one, or like 15 of her songs are in the top 30 or some crap, and it's like, it's not the same as releasing a single and watching it climb up the charts based on people calling in and requesting it, or single sales when they used to sell the CD singles along with the albums. Nowadays, it's just, it's released on streaming, and if you listen to it, that counts. That's stupid. There's really no such thing as singles anymore. I mean, there's stuff they play on the radio that gets sent there, but they don't even judge number ones by the radio play anymore. It's all judged by streaming, and a lot of times streaming, sometimes it just plays. If you let stuff play, you're not even in the room, it plays. You could leave the house, have something play on Spotify for 2 hours, and they just play whatever it wants, and you're sending their songs up the ratings by not even being there. So that's not how it was back in the 90s, or even in the early 2000s. You had, you got to call into the radio station, you got to request this, go out and buy the single. It goes on sales too. It's just today's music, not just today's music quality, but today's way they do it. It's just stupid. But anyway. Speaking of sales and albums, one album was released this month that I have, and I have probably had it since the early 2000s. Didn't get it when it came out, but it's Sammy Kershaw, and it's his first greatest hits album called The Hits Chapter 1. It It was certified gold. I'm surprised it didn't go higher, but maybe it's just because other people had his regular albums. Featured 12 songs. 10 of them were singles from his first 3 albums. And then there was a song that was never released from, I think, his 3rd album. It's called Still Lovin' You. It was never released as a single, but I guess he liked it so much. And it's a really good song, too. And then one new song was released, because, a lot of times when artists will release a greatest hits, especially back then, I don't even know if they do that now. They just put it all on streaming. Sorry, not to beat a dead horse there. But a lot of times they would release a couple new songs just to give people a reason to buy the greatest hits. Otherwise, they'd be like, well, I already got the albums. Why would I buy this? More of a marketing thing for studios than for artists. I heard a lot of artists don't actually care for putting out greatest hits stuff because they feel it cheats the fans, and it's like nothing new. It's kind of like in between. But a lot of times they use it for like an in between, like a stopgap before their next album comes out. Anyway, the one song that was released from this was called Your Tattoo, which ended up going to number 7. Hands down, my favorite Sammy Kershaw song of all time is on here, and it was, I think, from his first album. If not, it was the second. It was the song called Yard Sale. Man, coincidentally, that's, I think, is probably my favorite song to sing, and the one I think I sing the best. My personal opinion on that is nobody else is like, oh, you sing so good. It's just my opinion. That's my favorite song to sing, and I think the one I did the best. But Yard Sale is just one of them songs that just hits you. And it's funny, like it's not funny. The song's about a guy having a yard sale for all the the things that are left behind after his wife and kids left, and he's there all alone, selling all the stuff, and you're watching people sorting, like it says, he's sorting through what's left of you and me. But like I said, it's not funny, but it's funny, like that song like tears you up as a kid. Like I was like how old I was when this was out. But anyway, that when that song came out, I wasn't even 10 yet, but I was like I know how it feels. Like, no, you don't. Anyway, it's funny how some certain songs will hit you as a kid that you have no idea what the emotions are about. You haven't been through a divorce where your wife's left and you got to sell off all your stuff. Like, oh, poor little 7-year-old me. I just know how it feels. More like probably 8 or 9, but still. Even as a 15-year-old, having like first breakup with a girlfriend, you don't know what it's like to. Anyway, that's enough of that. Alright guys, now we're going to talk about some stuff happening in the TV world. Being September, of course, a big month. Always a month of premieres and TV shows going back on the air for their new seasons. A new, not new network. I'm not sure when the WB network started. I know it was close to this time, but a new block of Saturday morning kids cartoons started with the Kids WB. Before then, it was, of course, it was ABC, CBS, and NBC. And then Fox joined with Fox Kids. And then NBC around this time started being the teenage thing where they focus more on basketball shows and teen dramas than actual Saturday morning cartoons. But then the Kids WB debuted. They were headed up by Animaniacs as their big show. Of course, Animaniacs had already been out a couple years on Fox Kids. But of course, they're the Warner Brothers, so they're owned by the WB, so they're like, I think we're going to take this show for ourselves. But it also went with the spinoff that they created for it, Pinky and the Brain, which is, of course, one of the cartoons on Animaniacs, and they got their own show there. So those two kind of headed up the Kids WB. Of course, they never overtook the Fox and ABC and CBS in popularity, but they got close. Another one, I didn't even realize this existed because I never watched it, was on UPN, which in our town was that Channel 25 I told you about. WBQC, it was the one that aired ECW, which I didn't even know at the time was a thing. But they launched UPN Kids, and I never even watched it, let alone heard of it. If you guys got any memories of UPN Kids or how long it lasted, let me know. But season 7 of The Simpsons happened this month, and that was a pretty big. I mean, Simpsons were at like probably their height of their popularity, and I know it's hard to say that because they've had levels of popularity, but as far as like everybody watching, this was like the big one because it ended on like a huge cliffhanger. It kind of parodied the Dallas, that nighttime soap opera from, I think it was the 80s. Instead of Who Shot JR, it was Who Shot Mr. Burns. They premiered with the second part of that, and of course it ended up being Maggie. But that was like a huge thing over the summer. Like, they'd have commercials, and they would have, like, I remember stuff like the stores where you could, like, vote on this thing and, like, send it in. I guess the store sent it in, or I don't know if they might have thrown it away just as a way to get talk going, over the summer months to try to figure out who was the one that shot Mr. Burns. I don't know if I even remember. I don't think I remember who I thought it was. I definitely didn't think it was Maggie. But anyway, that was a big deal. Another show that debuted was the Drew Carey Show. I love this show. Obviously, Drew Carey now hosts The Price is Right, and that's what he's mostly known for. But there's a period of time when Drew Carey was like super popular. He had this show. I think it was a couple seasons after this, but he had the show named after him and created for him, the Drew Carey Show, and he also hosted Whose Line Is It Anyway? Like I said, there was a time to the late 90s that Drew Carey was like huge. But this show was on ABC. It went 9 seasons, and the thing that sucks about it is you can't find it anywhere, like streaming, and it's all because of music rights stuff. Because if you watch the Drew Carey Show, you know that not just the intros had music in it, but there was a lot of episodes where he had music playing through it, and of course all the rights and that stuff. I wish they wouldn't have had that now, or I wish they could just dub over it somehow. But I mean, there's whole episodes where it's like a musical episode where they can't really. It just sucks because all the corporate greed and we got to get the money for this. It's just let people watch this stuff. I mean, it was a funny show. I think a lot of people would watch it now for the first time and discover it because they don't even have it on reruns anymore. I don't think. It's just so stupid the way copyright crap is. I deal with that all the time on YouTube. Freaking Eagles took a couple of my songs that I covered down of theirs, and I actually got a copyright strike because of it. It's like I wasn't making any money off of it, just singing one of their songs. I guess they're that poor, even though they're not. But anyway, a show that was ending at the time was The Family Feud, which had been a staple forever. At the time, it was hosted by Richard Dawson, which, of course, is the original host. He took over after the tragic... I can't say it on here because certain words get you banned on YouTube, but Ray Combs took his own life. I've talked about that before on an episode. He was a Cincinnati guy, and just, like, he'd been going through a whole lot with a divorce and just everything, and, mental illness, and he ended up taking his own life, sadly. And Richard Dawson took back over The Family Feud. Well, they canceled it, probably because Richard Dawson didn't want to do it long term, because he hadn't been the host since like the 70s or 80s. I think the 80s was the last time he was the host. But they would bring it back just 4 years later in 1999 with Louis Anderson as the host, and they ended up having Richard Karn, and of course Steve Harvey's now been the host forever of it. And anytime you see clips on Facebook or YouTube, or it's usually the Steve Harvey version. Another show that was ending after 2 seasons and 85 episodes was Batman the Animated Series. This is definitely one of those. It was in my top 10. I can't remember what number it placed, but my bonus episode of the top 50 Saturday morning cartoons, it was in my top 10. Batman the Animated Series was just great. I mean, it was a darker Batman for the time. Of course, to go along with the darker 90s Batman movies. Of course, Batman, I mean, the comics I think were originally darker, but you get the 60s, the series and the movie with Adam West, and it was like, just funny and, just complete humor. Even when they try to act like it's serious, there's a lot of humor behind it. The 90s version of Batman didn't have that, but it was still fun. I mean, but not in like a funny haha way. It was just like more of an adventure thing, and I love Batman the Animated Series. But I do want to talk about, because at this time, I forgot to even mention at the beginning that I was 11 years old at this time. It was September, so back when I was in school, that was when school started up. Nowadays, they start up in freaking beginning of August, which is stupid. But when I was in school, it was around the 1st of September, somewhere around there, a little bit after that school would start. And this was a transitional time for me because I know a lot of schools, sometimes their elementary school goes to 6th grade. Ours went to 5th grade where I lived in Norwood, Ohio. So I was going to Norwood View Elementary School for 5th grade. But then 6th grade, I think there was like 5 elementary schools. We all converged on Norwood Middle School. So you're going to school with, your classmates, obviously, but also you're the 4 other schools' 5th grade classmates. So it was a lot to take in at once, that transitioning from elementary school to middle school. First of all, it was about a mile away, and of course there was no buses because everything was at least a mile distance somewhere. So they're like, oh, kids can walk that, or they get their parents to take them. It was walking for me. I literally went uphill both ways, not even trying to pull the old man. And a lot of times in the snow, because like I said, there was no buses, so it took a lot to get school canceled then. It took, more than 6 inches of snow normally to get school canceled then. But, I remember they had what was it? Orientation, that's what I was trying to think of the word. Orientation for 6th grade, where they'd have like this cookout, but you go to visit the school. And our school was, I don't know, a lot of schools have different quirks and stuff, or not really quirks, but like the way they're sectioned off. Our school had a red and a blue cluster, and it was just a way to not, it was just a random assigning. It wasn't like, oh, the better kids go here or the trouble kids go. It was just a way to separate. Like I said, it was 5 schools worth of classes, and I remember in our elementary school there was probably like 25 kids in 5th grade over, spread out between 3 classes. So that's like 75 kids. If everything was even with that, you're getting almost 400 to 500 kids coming in. You separated them into clusters, the red cluster and the blue cluster, and then the next, I started in red. So the next year when I went to 7th grade, you would go to blue. It switches. Of course, I failed 7th grade, so I was in 7th blue and red. But anyhow, that's another story for later, which I've told before, but still later than this time period. But yeah, you go there and you learn all the stuff. The cafeteria is over in the high school, which is connected to the middle school by this like bridge up in the air. Well, it wasn't air; it was covered. Whatever they call them things, I just called it the bridge. Because we were in what used to be the high school. Then they ended up having to build a newer high school, and the middle school was still like bigger. Like we had 3 gyms. We had the boys' gym, the girls' gym, and then what was called the field house, which is this huge gym area. The boys and the girls' gyms were like smaller ones. Remember the boys' gym had a track like that ran over top of it. On this I'd be afraid to go up there now if it's still. I'm sure it still exists. Like this rickety metal structure. Like I for sure would probably knock it down now. but that's beside the point. But yeah, it was just it was such a a difference. Like I'm sure you guys remember that too. I'm almost positive there's no school where you go through kindergarten through 12th grade in just one school building. Eventually you're going to change. Like I said, some schools, elementary school goes through 5th grade, some goes through 6th. Ours was 5th grade, and then 6th grade, 7th, and 8th was middle school. A lot of schools call that junior high. Ours was called middle school. It just depends where you're from and what they call it. But I mean, 1, you're going to a new school. 2, you've got like 4 times the amount of people just in your grade, not even counting the whole school, just in your grade of people that you've never even met before. I'm sure there's some people that may know people that go to other schools, but a lot of us stayed in especially us, we weren't allowed outside hardly ever, but we stayed in our own neighborhood that was there by the school, and that's why we went to that school, because it was close there. And now I'm going to talk about something that I didn't start at the beginning of the podcast, like when I started it, maybe about the middle. That's because sometimes I'll just get ideas in my head, like, what? I'll start talking about something like, this could be actual segment because I can talk about this each month. That's what I normally do, is I have, when I talk about something, it's usually something that happens every month. I don't, like with this, it's talking about kids' meal toys, more commonly known as Happy Meal toys, I know, because McDonald's is always the one everybody thinks of. But just those were such an important part of childhood, and even though we didn't get to eat out all the time, when we did, And we got these toys, you know, they were like prized possessions. And I'm sure there was a lot of kids out there that got to eat out a lot more and, you know, got to collect whole sets of these things, which is really cool. But first one, of course, talk about the Happy Meal. They had the Busy World of Richard Scarry toys, which I love that cartoon. It was originally a Showtime cartoon, but then would be on Saturday morning cartoons. They had a set of, these were really cool, by the way. I never had one, but doing the research, I thought these were really cool. There was 4 toys, and it featured a building and a vehicle with a character. So, you know, and they would correspond to the character, the vehicles, and the buildings. Like, we start with Lowly Worm, which was my favorite character from there. He was always in the Apple car. Well, you get the Apple car with Lowly Worm in it, and the post office, you know, because he was the mailman of the town, the mail worm. Then we got Huckle Cat, which is probably the main character of the cartoon. But he was in a crate car. It was like a car that was like made out of a crate, and a school, because, you know, he was him and his sister. I can't remember the female cat's name, but they were kids. They were going to school. Then we got Mr. Frumble in a pickle car with a fire station, and then Bananas Gorilla in a surprise banana car with a grocery store, because, you know, he worked at the store. Really fun stuff. For Burger King, if everybody remembers, especially like the mid-90s, it was all about the Burger King Kids Club. That's where they tried to separate themselves from the Happy Meal stuff and, you know, all the Ronald McDonald and stuff. They came out with the Kids Club with like these set of like these characters that, you know, they would have in the commercials, and have, you know, sometimes they would have toys based on them. So, you know, trying to build up the brand of the Burger King Kids Club. Well, at this time they had a set of 5 water bottles. And they were called the Burger King Kids Club Coolers, and a set of 5 water bottles, each one based on a different character from the Kids Club. And for Wendy's, they had something called Animal Links. Sometimes they did this with Happy Meal or Kids Meal toys, where there was like these strange animal mixes between, you know, they would do like a mix between this animal and this animal, and half the time they don't even go together, but they just create it. But these were also ink pens, so, you know, you get the character plus a pen, you know, because especially during this time in September, like I said, back to school, they were doing a lot of, by the way, I have a bonus episode all about back to school. This is a cheap plug for that in case you haven't watched it. But yeah, during September, sometimes they would do toys that doubled as things to use for school. Taco Bell had a set of 6 jungle puzzles, and these are like the big wooden puzzles like you'd see for littler kids, but they'd have a few more pieces. But the cool thing about these is you could actually get the pieces from this and like use them in other, because they were all shaped the same, you know, they're squares. You could use them in the, like I said, there was a set of 6 of them. You could use them in other puzzles and create your own like hybrid animals, sort of like the animal links from Wendy's, but you know, in puzzle form. And then one I hadn't talked about, but I didn't realize they had kids meals, and I was going to talk about them a little more later on, is Hardee's. This is my first time talking about Hardee's kids meal toys. They had Nickelodeon school tools, which, like I said, I'm talking about school. These are a set of 6 school tools. That sounds weird. School tools sounds weird to say together. But stuff like a ruler, a compass, and, you know, other things, you know, Nickelodeon themed and, you know, made for taking to school. And then now I'm going to talk about, I started this segment when I found this list. A lot of these aren't actually obsolete these days. It's just different forms. But these are the 5, I call this 5 more obsolete things from the 90s, because I found this list. And I figured I'd talk about 5 each week, because I talked about the whole thing. It was like 50, I think. Then, you know, it'd be too long. I'm already too long on this podcast. But personal music mixtapes. Of course, we didn't call them mixtapes. That became like a 2000s buzzword for what they called them back then. We just called them, we recorded off the radio. That's how it started. Either you record off the radio, or you have a dual cassette deck where you record from one tape to the other. So you can make copies of tapes, or you could just take songs. But a lot of it was just sitting there and recording, you know, waiting for, you know, the new favorite song to come on. You record it off the radio, and of course, you know, you only had, you know, if you weren't rich like me, I wasn't. You only had a certain amount of tapes before you had, you know, and you had to tape over that, which always sucked because you lost music. But you're like, I really want to hear this song now, because, you know, the new song would come out. Like, I love this song, I can't get enough of it, so I got to record it. And, you know, that was like life back then. You know, recording it off the radio and hoping that the DJ didn't talk too much over the start or the end of the song. Sometimes they did that, and it's like, oh, shut up. it's like they talk too much. It's like, okay, I'm gonna have to wait till the song comes on again. And you always liked later in the day, towards night, especially nighttime, because the DJ wasn't on there a whole lot. But if it was in the morning, first of all, you don't get many. Back then, you didn't get many songs in the morning from like 6 to 10, 6 to 9, 6 to 10. It was a lot of the morning DJ stuff. But and then afternoons, a lot of the drive time, as they called them, DJs. But towards the evening, towards the end of the night, was really where you'd get a lot of songs without the DJ talking over them, which was perfect for recording. So that was your peak recording times. And then of course you get CDs and burning CDs and everything to come the late 90s and early 2000s. So you started making those CD mixes where you'd have you'd either burn your music to the computer, which everybody had a CD collection. You'd burn it to the computer. And then, of course, there was certain ways to download music, like LimeWire back then. It'd be like, LimeWire, where you can get 3 songs and 20 viruses all in one download. It'd only take you 2 hours to download those songs, by the way. But yeah, you'd make those, and I still make CD mixes to this day that to listen to in the car. I haven't made any tape ones, but I do actually have some cassette tapes that I listen to in the car, because we have our van is a 2007, but it has a cassette deck and a CD player, so listen to that out there. But yeah, the days of the mixtapes, they may be gone, but these days it's pretty much what playlists now. You come up, which I don't have many playlists like this type of music. I have just all my music in one that I put on random. That and I think I've got like 35. What does it say? I actually got my music player pulled up here. I use Music Bee, by the way. It's a free music player. I found it works the best. What was it? Trying to go to my music thing here. 30.9 days of continuous music of all different songs. That's how much music I got on here. Almost a month's worth of music. I could just let it play and not hear the same song twice, or at least the same version. Have live versions. But anyway, I don't really like making playlists as far as like, this is my sad songs, this is for my happy moods. I just let it play, and if I don't like it, I skip it. But I do have a Christmas playlist. I have a Halloween playlist, obvious times of year, and then I have a Christian music playlist. But as far as like, this type of only country or only this, there's no reason. Anyway, moving on to the next obsolete thing is something I've talked about before, but free things under pop lids. And you could also put into this toys that you get for free in cereal boxes. It's just these days you got all these codes and all these little things online, and just nothing beats opening a pop and winning a free 20 ounce. Or sometimes it's a buy one get one free, but a lot of times you just win a free 20 ounce. Or you go in the cereal box and you get a free toy at the bottom. Nothing beats that. They obviously don't do that these days, especially with the toys or with the cereal boxes. I wish they would. That would be a really cool thing to bring back. And it was always like inexpensive things. It wasn't like you're gonna find a $20 toy in there or something. It's just like with the Happy Meal toys. Just cheap stuff that they can produce to put out to get people to buy it. And a lot of people did buy the cereals just for the prizes in there. I mean, the cereals were good, obviously, but the prizes was really the draw for it. Another thing that's pretty much obsolete these days, or at least in the form of it, is lunch boxes. And I actually have this one here. It's got spider webs on it. But the Hulk Hogan, I found this at a flea market. WWF lunchbox. I had many different lunch boxes back then. I remember having a Power Rangers one. And of course, those are those classic lunch boxes. The hard plastic, and inside it's got the thermos. Where you get a drink to put in there, and of course, later on, especially during this time, a lot of that stopped, and people were buying school lunches more. But still, back then, you would find people with lunch boxes all the time. Nowadays, they have these little like soft things. If kids even take their stuff to school in lunch boxes, but Mostly the days of the lunch boxes are gone. I mean, especially when you can just put stuff in a plastic bag these days. But I miss those hard plastic lunch boxes. It seems like you'd see every kid with the book bag on. I call them book bags. I know a lot of people call them backpacks, but kid with the book bag on, carrying a lunch box. You know, something you'd always see in school then, elementary school for sure. Home phones and answering machines. Home phones aren't completely obsolete. People still use them. But them and answering machines are pretty much obsolete. I mean, there's probably some people that still use them. But, I mean, home phones, of course, you go from the original one where you just pick up the thing. Then they got the rotary phone. Then they came out with the button phone. And then they finally came out with, like, cordless phones. You know, you could just, like, pick up the phone and take it with you and just put it on the charger. But, of course, cell phones obliterated home phones. We actually have as part of our thing, and it's included in it, and you can't take it off really, so it's not really wasting it, but included in our internet package, we actually have home phone, but with our last, not the internet box we got now, but the one we had before this, there was actually, they sent us like the wrong one where it didn't have a connection for the phone. So we just didn't use it. We actually have a phone number, but I actually can go online, and I changed it so all calls get forwarded to my cell phone. So they just ring on that. And when we got a new internet box that had a connection for the phone, it's like, why bother getting a home phone? It just goes to my cell phone anyway. You know, but you know, I wouldn't purposely like, oh, I gotta have a home phone. You know, everybody uses cell phones now. You know, it's mobile phones, but it's pretty much the home phone. And of course, answering machines now has been replaced by voicemail, which is all digital on your phone. Even with the home phones now, especially I got Spectrum. I know, pray for me with Spectrum, with it working. But they have a digital voicemail with that too. If I didn't have it routed to my phone, so like I said. And if you don't know the difference, if you're younger than me and don't know the difference between answering machines, you just hear that, and a lot of people hear it and don't know what I'm talking about, or they hear it and think of, oh, it's voicemail, right? It was literally a machine with this little tape, and you would record on it like, we ain't able to come to the phone, blah blah blah, or some people put music on there or funny messages or something. But then after the beep, and it would literally beep. And it would record what you said, and you would have to, you can go back and listen to it over when you get home, and rewind it, and so you can record over it the next day. But back then it was actual tapes. It wasn't just the digital storage thing. The last thing I want to talk about, it hasn't really gone away, but I don't see a lot of people doing it as much, and that's rollerblades. And I don't see a lot of people skateboarding in these days either. But I mean, I know they still do. But rollerblades during the mid '90s were like all the rage. Roller skates were kind of out. Rollerblades were in. I've never used rollerblades before. I've only used roller skates, and I was pretty good back then. Especially during this time. I was really good on roller skates. Rollerblades, I just never tried. It seemed like, okay, how are you supposed to stay on this little thin thing? Or you can have these four wheels. It always just like, I don't want to even try rollerblades. Anyway, fast forward to, I don't know how many times. 05. About 20 years after I could skate around the skating rink and, backwards, forwards, do all kinds of stuff. I can't even stand up in these freaking roller skates without falling down when I went back there. I was like, oh, I can do this. This is easy. 2 minutes of that, sitting back down, taking the roller skates off, and letting the kids have fun, because no more of that for me. I can't imagine now, like 10 years after that, going back and trying to roller skate. I would somehow break my ankle just putting it on my foot. But anyway, we're getting close to the end here on the podcast. Sorry if it's a little long. Sometimes I get going. You know how I am. Talk about sports. Being September, you get the end of baseball and the beginning of football. So a lot going on in sports, especially in baseball. The season before '94 is the infamous one known as the baseball strike, that a lot of people, didn't go back to watching baseball for a while because of the strike. But the '95 season wasn't exactly a full season. Full season's 162 games. This had 144 because the strike kind of extended the beginning of '95 season. Luckily, they got it out of the way. They had most of the season. But '94 is when the Central Division was added. So before that was the Western and the Eastern. Then they added the Central and they broke it up more, which is a lot better because the Reds were in the Western Division, and that's my team, the Reds from Cincinnati. And if you look at Ohio on the map, there ain't nothing Western about Ohio. But anyway, thanks to the Central, they actually got to be in there. And like I said, the strike ended the season before. There was no playoffs or nothing. So '95 was actually the first year where there would be an NL and an AL Central Division team crowned. And wouldn't you know, the Reds go down as the first team to ever win the NL Central, which is pretty cool. And this is the last time we would win the NL Central until 2010, but that's another thing. The leaders for the ones who got to the playoffs for the National League were the Braves, the Reds, and the Dodgers. And for the first time ever since they had the divisions, before it was Western and Eastern, you have the two teams face off to see who goes to the World Series. You add a third. How do you do three teams? Well, you got to add a wild card team. So they added a wild card team then, and it was the Rockies, and they were the first ever NL wild card team winner. And for the American League, it was the Red Sox, the Indians, and the Mariners, and then the Yankees won the wild card. And like I said, the Reds won the Central Division. Did pretty well for themselves on the playoffs. They swept the Dodgers 3-0 in the division series, which of course the first time that had ever happened. Before it was just the two teams and then the World Series. Now they added an extra round. Of course nowadays that's all different. I'm just talking about '95. But yeah, we swept the Dodgers. But then in the game in the series to get to the World Series, the NLCS, National League Championship Series, the Braves swept us 4-0. And, of course, they would go on to beat the Cleveland Indians in the World Series. And, of course, that was the heyday of the 90's Braves. I mean, no wonder they swept us. There was no way we were winning that one. The players of the month for September were Dante Bichette for the Rockies and Albert Bell of the White Sox. And in the pitchers of the month, Greg Maddux, of course, for the Cubs. Of course, Greg Maddux is going to win that. And Norm Charlton, which I'm not sure who he played for. It might have been the Angels. This wasn't. I mean, he obviously played for us, but that wasn't then. He was the American League then. But the big news that happened in September, besides all the playoff spots being filled, was September 5th. Cal Ripken Jr. Tied the most consecutive games played record that was held by Lou Gehrig. Which is, of course, known as the Iron Man record, which is where I can't remember the full number. It was like 2,100 something, I think, games played in a row. No days off. Of course, they obviously don't count the strike because that wasn't counted as a day off, obviously. But that many games in a row was impressive, especially back then when the game was a lot tougher and there was a lot of sliding in with spikes up and it was just by nature less padding. People didn't have all those things on their elbows and the big oven mitt gloves that they for batting, or not batting, for running the bases. So it was definitely impressive. But then the very next day he broke Lou Gehrig's record, obviously, and that record still belongs to Cal Ripken Jr., one of the greatest of all time and one of the toughest of all time, the Iron Man for sure. And like I said, the NFL had just started. They had their first 4 weeks of the season. Leaders for the AFC were the Dolphins, who were perfect 4-0 at the time, the Browns, the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Raiders. And these were the Oakland Raiders because they had previously been the Los Angeles Raiders, and of course they'd started as the Oakland Raiders, so they kind of flipped. And now they're the Las Vegas Raiders in 2025 time. But and the leaders for the NFC were the Cowboys, the Packers, the Falcons, and the Rams. The Rams, this is the first year the Rams being St. Louis Rams. They're formerly the LA Rams. Of course, they're once again, what are they now? Now they're the Los Angeles Rams again. But I don't know why both teams left LA then, but they did. And the 49ers were the other leader. The Cowboys would end up going on to win the Super Bowl against the Steelers, of course. The 90's were of course, the big heyday of the Cowboys and the 49ers. They were the two dominant teams. I mean, other teams had some big runs in there. The Packers, the Broncos near the end. The Bills, of course, 4 Super Bowls in a row they lost, but still, I mean, they made it there 4 times. But when people think of 90s NFL, they always think of the Cowboys and the 49ers. Troy Aikman and Joe Montana. And then, of course, later, Steve Young, of course. And then, of course, Jerry Rice, Deion Sanders, Emmitt Smith. Just go on and on about those teams, and they weren't even my team. The Bengals finished the season second in the AFC Central, 7-9. Which, if you know anything about the 90s Bengals, finishing 7-9 is probably like having a winning season to our team. It's probably the best we did in the whole 90s, because the Bengals were absolute trash in the 90s, like god awful. And then a little bit of NASCAR news. Jeff Gordon won the Mountain Dew Southern 500 at Darlington and the MBNA 500 from Dover. And this was the year he won his very first NASCAR championship. And then a couple other races happened that month. Rusty Wallace won the Miller Genuine Draft 400 from Richmond. And all-time great Dale Earnhardt won the Goodies 500 from Martinsville. Now, I mentioned before about Hardee's. They're on my mind today because the Hardee's local to us closed, and I found out a couple other locations closed. And I don't know if they're all owned by the same person and they're just like going out of business, because I haven't heard anything about Hardee's as a whole going out of business, but maybe around here they are. And maybe they should, okay? Going back to this time period, I freaking loved Hardee's. They sold fried chicken that was, it wasn't as good as KFC, but it was still really good. It was different. It was different. Tasted more like a homemade type fried chicken. Not that I have anything wrong with KFC's, but Hardee's fried chicken was definitely different. But they were mostly known for their really good breakfasts. Hardee's had some great breakfasts. Their biscuits, bacon, like everything tasted like, almost like just like homemade, like you weren't eating fast food, but you'd still get it in fast food time. Like, I don't know how they did it, but I mean, Hardee's was the place to be then. A funny story I told before on a podcast was, we were at Hardee's with my stepdad Steve, and this was around the time period of probably 98 or so. It was when, I can't stand these people, ICP was in WWF, and they were with the Oddities, if you remember that team. And they had the song called The Oddities, but Travis couldn't pronounce Oddities, so he called them Oidies. And we were just like calling people that, like, oh, look at that Oidie, anybody that we thought was stupid or something, or weird. But we went to Hardee's one day. It was around mid-morning to noon, because they were like changing over from breakfast. But anyway, there was like people in there, like, they had to be on drugs. There was people on the floor. There was one person in the bathroom, like, I remember like throwing up. Like, I was in there, and he was like, I think me and Steve went to go to the bathroom, because obviously they had a different toilet. We were using the same toilet. But there's this guy in there, and he was like throwing up, like, in the urinal and all over the wall, like projectile vomiting, sorry about the visual, but carrots of all things, like all over the wall in the urinal. we both walked out at the same time. It's like, he's definitely an oidie. But anyway, that's just a funny memory. But I remember that around 97 is when all the Hardee's closed, and I was like, what the heck, Hardee's closed? And come to find out that they were, which I didn't know at the time, they were actually bought out by Carl's Jr., Carly Jr. of, the West Coast restaurant. And they were brought back in different locations using the Hardee's name, but with just all Carl's Jr.'s food. Nothing. If there is anything original from Hardee's, it wasn't the good stuff. It wasn't the fried chicken. It wasn't the really good breakfast. And they brought it back around here maybe, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I was all excited, like, Hardee's is back. Until I tried the food, and it's clear it's just Carl's Jr. The food is not very good to absolutely disgusting, depending on what you get. The customer service is horrible, and I feel bad for the employees that lost their jobs there, so I'm not going to say ha 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 or anything. Especially this time, they closed beginning of December, seemingly without warning, leaving a bunch of people without a job right before Christmas, real time. But I'm not surprised with with the way they were, that is not my Hardee's from the 90s. The Carl's Jr. using the Hardee's name, they should have just kept the Carl's Jr. named and took over the Hardee's restaurants or something. But not sad to see them go, but I'm sad for the employees and sad for my childhood because I want to remember Hardee's as what it was in the 90s, not what it was these days. But I'm going to talk about one more thing. Well, a couple more things, but it's like one subject before we get out of here, and that is the Saturday morning cartoon lineup and the Nickelodeon lineup, all for the same day. This is September 9th, 1995, and this was the very first day of that, the WB having the kids' shows for the Saturday morning cartoons, and of course the season premiere for everything. We'll start out with ABC. We had The New Adventures of Madeline, new series it says. I've never even heard of that. I've heard of Madeline the movie, but I've never heard of the cartoon. Free Willy the cartoon. Never really watched that. And then at 9 we got one of my all-time favorites, Tales from the Crypt Keeper. It wasn't a new season, then there were reruns, but definitely loved that. And then one that followed it up, which I never really watched, but was sort of in the same vein, called Bump in the Night. And then we got a show called Fudge. Never even heard of that. And then one called Reboot. I never heard of those. I don't know. Then at 11, for an hour, we got the Bugs Bunny and Tweety Show. Which is, of course, another one of the Looney Tunes spin-offs. Love that show, that cartoon. Then over on CBS, we got The Mask, the animated series, which was a new series then. For an hour, of course, based on The Mask, the Jim Carrey movie. Jim Carrey was, like, huge around this time. At one time, he had The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, which I'd never even known was a cartoon, and Ace Ventura cartoons all at once. Just the cartoon series. Not to mention all the movies he's putting out. Those movies, that turned into the cartoon series. The Cable Guy, Liar Liar. He was just pumping out hit movies. Like, he was like a huge star then. And then from 9 to 10, we got Garfield and Friends. Was still on the air. Love that cartoon. Disney's Aladdin, of course, the series version of the hit Aladdin movie. And then Beakman's World, which I never really watched. I know it was in the same vein of a Bill Nye the Science Guy, or my favorite science show as a kid, Mr. Wizard, which I'll probably be talking about on the Nickelodeon page, if it was on then. If they hadn't took it off of the air then. On Fox, we got Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego, not the PBS game show. This was a cartoon version, of course, all based on the PC game Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. Then at 8:30, we've got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The episode was A Friend in Need Part 2. I don't remember that off the top of my head, but that was the episode. And then following that, A Friend in Need Part 3. So obviously carrying over from the last. I don't know if Power Rangers was off season then, because their seasons were kind of weird. They didn't go from September to they just kind of whenever they were on. Then we got Eek Extravaganza. I never really cared for that cartoon. It annoyed me, honestly. Sorry. Then we got Spider-Man the animated series. I watched that a little bit, not as much as Batman or X-Men. Then we got The Tick, which another one that annoyed me. Speaking of X-Men, we got X-Men the animated series. They started a new season. Again, one of the things, I'm not really into comics or superhero movies, but I love the X-Men animated series. And then 11:30, we've got Life with Louie, my favorite ones. Obviously, Louie Anderson. Love that cartoon. Then on NBC, we've got the teen stuff. Saved by the Bell, the new class. Really didn't care for that. I think that was the premiere of that, because the episode was called Welcome to Bayside. So, I like the original Saved by the Bell. Didn't watch it in the mornings, but, definitely didn't care for the new class. Then we got Hang Time, a basketball-themed show. Saved by the Bell, the new class again. California Dreams, like another teen show. And then NBA Inside stuff, and I didn't care for the NBA, so said I was not watching NBC. But then we've got the brand new Kids WB, and they start off with Animaniacs, which is, of course, a new series for the WB, but like the third season of actual Animaniacs. Then we've got the Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries, another Looney Tunes spinoff. Sylvester and Tweety are solving mysteries now. Then we got Animaniacs again. And then we got the very first episode of Pinky and the Brain. Of course, like I said, they've been a cartoon in the original show, but the first episode of the actual Pinky and the Brain show. Freakazoid, I've heard of that, but never watched that. And then Earthworm Jim, based on the video game, obviously, but I've never seen the show. So that's the Saturday morning cartoons. Of course, you could also watch stuff on Nickelodeon. At this time in September, don't remember if we had cable or not, but it was September, so I was going to school, so I probably wasn't over at Granny's house on this. I might have been at Granny's house on Saturday morning, because sometimes we go over there for the weekend. But anyway, we're talking about Nickelodeon. I always start at midnight, and of course, at midnight you've got Nick at Night. You've got the Bob Newhart Show, the Lucy Show, one of my mom's favorites. Dragnet, the Munsters at 1:30 a.m. Don't see that a lot on Nick at Night then. Love the Munsters, one of my all-time favorite. I got the whole series. It's great. Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, Welcome Back Kotter, Dick Van Dyke Show, Bob Newhart Show, Lucy Show again, Dragnet again, I Love Lucy. That's two of the Lucy shows. We got the Lucy Show and I Love Lucy. The other one is the Lucy and Desi Comedy Hour. And then at 6, we start with the Nickelodeon, but still have classic shows kind of thing that they did. Where we got, I don't see Mr. Wizard on there. I guess he was off the air then. Anyway, we got Flipper and then Lassie, of course, the animals that always save the day. And at 7, we got one of my all-time favorite game shows, Nick Arcade. Man, I talked about that at length before. Love that one. The video games, the game show concept, the host was entertaining, just so much fun. Then we got the Nickelodeon Wild Side Show, which was like an animal type show. I never really watched that. Then we've got at 8 one of the 3 original Nicktoons, Doug, followed by another one of the 3 original Nicktoons, Rugrats, and of course the third one of that isn't on here unless it's on later is Ren and Stimpy. Those were the 3 first original Nicktoons, Ren and Stimpy, Doug, and Rugrats. Then from 9 to 10 we got Muppet Babies, one of my favorites. The only Muppet thing I like. I don't like the Muppet Show or any of that stuff really, or any of the Muppet movies, but I love Muppet Babies. Then at 10, speaking of things that I like but don't like, Beetlejuice. Love the cartoon. I didn't really care for the movie and never even seen the sequel. I know, kill me for that one. And then at 10:30 we got Gumby, which is just classic. Love that. Then the Alvin Show, which is Alvin and the Chipmunks packaged for Nickelodeon. Theme song's already starting to play in my head. Then we've got Salute Your Shorts, followed by Hey Dude, 2 of the Nickelodeon Kids Go Here for the Summer thing. For Salute Your Shorts, they go to summer camp. For Hey Dude, they go work at a dude ranch out in Arizona. Then we got My Brother and Me, which I never really watched. And we got another Looney Tunes version. We got Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon, which is just the old Nickelodeon, or the old Looney Tunes cartoons with Nickelodeon branding. Then we got the Mark Summers hosted What Would You Do? Of course, the more famously known as the Double Dare host, but What Would You Do is like a variety show meets game show. Love that. Followed by what I describe as a game show meets field day at school. Wild and Crazy Kids. Love that one. We got my brother Josh's favorite show. I'm going to have to ask him about this when we do our bonus episode together. Wienerville. He loved that. Hosted by Mark Wiener. It's called Wienerville. And yes, all the innuendos are there, but not obvious to where, you can't say that around kids. Like the guy's name was actually Mark Wiener. Then Welcome Freshman. I never really watched. Oh, and then a great one, Family Double Dare. My favorite version of Double Dare 2, Family Double Dare. And then another premiere that wasn't listed on the TV thing is called The New Land of the Lost, which is, of course, based on the 70s show, which I never really cared for that. And when they did the movie recently, it was based on the 70s series. I didn't really care for that, but I love the 90s version. Brand new show, Land of the Lost. Loved it. Then, of course, we got Clarissa Explains It All, one of the greatest shows of all time. Then we got Nicktoon again, Doug. And another Nicktoon that we hadn't talked about yet, Rocko's Modern Life. One of my favorites. That show is just crazy. And another great Nicktoon. We got Ah Real Monsters. We got some great Nicktoons in a row there. Followed by yet another, Rugrats. And then we got Snick. But on this night, it was actually the end of Clarissa Explains It All. So they would, we get like 2 full hours, 4 episodes on Snick, just of Clarissa Explains It All, including the last episode, which was called The Last Episode. Great way to end that series, showing it all on Snick there. Love that one. Of course, Melissa Joan Hart hosted it. They tried to do a reboot where she was like in college and like working for the newspaper, but it only had a pilot, and it was on CBS, I think, and they took away everything that made Clarissa Explains It All, what made it good and made people want to watch it. They took it all away, so people didn't really care about it. But of course, Melissa Joan Hart went on to Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and made that series popular too. And then we get back to Nick at Night. We got I Love Lucy, followed... Oh my God, really? I'm not even making this up. I Love Lucy, followed by The Lucy Show, followed by The Lucy Desi Comedy Hour. It must have been a Lucy night. I think maybe that was purposely, because, I Love Lucy, obviously her husband's on there too, but Lucy is the main... Not a lot of TV shows were headlined as the main star as a female. Just like Clarissa Explains It All, one of those rare shows where the lead character is female, and there was a lot of things at the time like, oh, is it really going to go popular? But it was one of the most popular shows, and it wasn't just with girls. A lot of teenage boys watched it, because Clarissa was cool. That's the best way to describe her. She was cool to everybody. Teen boys watched it, teen girls watched it. It was, I think that's probably why they had the Lucy shows on after that. It was like, it was probably some theme night, like, the all women's night or something. But it was, a lot of fun to be had on Nickelodeon, obviously. And one final thing to talk about when I talk about them is talk about TGIF, which was, of course, ABC's Friday night lineup. Sort of like NBC's must-see TV was Thursday. Well, this was must-see TV for teenagers. Of course, the lead show at the time was Family Matters. They were in season 7. And then the second show was Boy Meets World. They were starting their third season. It starts, the first episode of that third season was where Corey, Eric is like showing a movie there at night at school. I'm pretty sure it was like, it wasn't supposed to be showing it or something. It was supposed to be something else. But of course, Feeney shows up at the end, of course, because you never get anything over on Feeney. But anyway, the whole premise of the show was Corey was too shy to ask Topanga out and too scared. So Sean asks her out, and of course, Sean knows Corey's feelings for Topanga, so, he's mad at this. So to get back at them, he asks Topanga's, like, annoying friend Trini out, and they go, like, they're there, like, sitting next to each other, and, Corey's, keeps looking over. Sean puts his arm around Topanga, and he puts his arm... it's a whole thing. But it turns out that actually it was Sean and Trini's plan, because he knew that they liked each other. It was their plan to get them together. It wasn't like Sean trying to take Corey's girl. So it was just all a ploy. But you tell how much I love Boy Meets World. And the third show was Step by Step. They were in their 5th season, and it actually introduced the character of Rich. He was played by Jason Marsden. He was JT's best friend, and of course would end up being with... I don't know if they got married or if they were just going out or what. I'd never seen the last couple seasons of that show. But Dana, JT's stepsister. And he was actually previously before that, he played the character, like his actual name, Jason, on Boy Meets World. He was best friends with Eric on there. And he was found out through the Boy Meets World podcast that Jason Marsden and Will Friedle, who played Eric, were actually real life best friends, and they both actually auditioned for the character of Eric. I'm so glad that the character, Will got the character of Eric, because nobody could have played Eric like he did. But and then the last show on there was the second to last season of Hanging with Mr. Cooper, which is season 4. Which, even though it was basketball themed, I still kind of like that show. I just haven't seen enough episodes to remember a lot from it. I just remember Mr. Cooper used to be an NBA player and then ended up becoming a teacher and a basketball coach. But sorry this one took forever. I know I always say that, but I don't want to bore anybody. But it's been a fun one to talk about. A lot of stuff to talk about of September 1995. Next week for episode number 56, we're actually going to go back about 9 months to December of 1994. This will be our 8th trip through 1994. And if you don't know, once I get through a whole year's worth of episodes, I'm going to do like a special 13th episode of that year, just giving like the top video games of the year, you know, based on sales, not my opinions, but I will give opinions. But I mean, top movies, you know, that type of stuff. But anyway, this will be our eighth trip through 1994. I'd turn 11 this month because my birthday's in December, and I was in 4th grade at the time. But that's next week, and we'll see you then.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.
Tales from the 90's never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars.